Welcome back to part 3 of Herb versus Jaehoon, and right now, once again, still evening up. These battles in the middle have just been going back and forth. Really, it's hard to say who's been a clear victor. Although it seems like Herb now is really zealot heavy. I'm not sure if that's going to be working out for him too well. If there's a lot of Psy Storms going on. Either way, it looks like both players. Actually, Jaehoon has got his 4th base up and running and is trying to get a 5th base, while Herb is just on 4 bases. I don't think he has any intent at the moment, at least, to get his 5th base up and running. Jaehoon once again trying to sneak a DT around that entire army of Herb and get it down into that brand new 4th base. But it was spotted, and I don't think it's going to be able to do any damage. But Herb really needs to find this 5th this 5th base at the northwest position that Jaehoon has set up. Because if Jaehoon's just able to get one extra base and keep this going, as this is really, like, since all of these battles have been so even, and since they are somewhat splitting up the map in terms of expansions. Herb needs to claim his territory and do it soon, or prevent Jaehoon from doing the same. If he can stop 1 or 2 of these expansions from Jaehoon, he'd be in great position. Otherwise, this could come out and turn out to be rather even and end up being an elimination battle. And if you're 1 base low in an elimination battle, that's definitely no good. Huge battle going on in the middle right here. Psy Storms on all sides. It's really hard to tell who's getting the better of this, but Jaehoon is having to retreat. I think there's just too many Archons now morphed for Herb, and he's got a huge Archon force, and he's saving actually some Zealots up in the background too to clear up any extra Dragoons. Those Archons are just doing huge splash damage to all the Zealots that are coming in, and the Psy Storms just aren't quite enough, and still 5 Archons are alive, and he's bringing this attack all the way into the natural expansion of Jaehoon. He's being met by a couple more a couple more Templar, and they were just storming the crap out of that bridge, but those Archons just have so much shield that most of them were able to well, I spoke a little too soon. I guess most of them died pretty quickly after that. Oh, and another killer pair of storms right on that bridge. That's very good storming by Jaehoon, and unfortunately not very great dodging by Herb, although his force was just big enough that he has kept 4 Dragoons alive as well as a Templar and a stream of Zealots coming up to reinforce. So still a close battle right now, although that last Psy Storm might be the tide turner in that. 4 Dragoons and a Templar left for Jaehoon. Wow, this is really surprising that neither player has decided to retreat from this battle yet, although Herb is finally turned aside by the last set of storms combined with the Dragoons. Jaehoon was continually pumping Dragoons throughout that whole series, while Herb was mostly reinforcing with Zealots and a couple of Templar. And those Zealots were just eating so much Psy Storm, and then it was just really easy for those Dragoons to pick them off. Normally Zealots are pretty good against Dragoons, but not after they've walked through 2 Psy Storms, So, anyways, Herb is finally chased out of there, although he is now going in for a little bit of Zealot harassment on that new 5th base of Jaehoon. And he might have, he's going to have just enough to take down those cannons, and Jaehoon is going to have to bring back his entire army to come and protect this. A couple of probe kills already, and still a couple of, maybe just, it's hard to see. I thought there was another Zealot hiding up there under the banner, but just 1 Zealot left. And he's finally taken down by a group of probes, and Jaehoon, luckily for himself, does not have to bring his entire army back into that base to defend it. Although that was a pretty decent harassment, but when you're on 5 bases, losing a handful of probes really doesn't make all that much difference. once again, and just great storms by Jaehoon, laying down like over the path that those zealots have to come across. However, Herb is doing a nice job. He's taking the other approach where once they start in the engagement, he's storming the lines of Dragoons, and it's really becoming sort of a Dragoon versus Zealot battle. And you know, the storms are what's making the difference in the battle. You know, Jaehoon going in with storming Zealots as they're approaching, and then Herb storming the Dragoons once they get there. So, you know, both players using their storms very wisely and very effectively. But, you know, it's to me, this seems like a pretty interesting unit composition that's going on. I would have expected more even distributions of Zealots and Dragoons from each player, whereas you know, Herb seems to be clearly favoring Zealots, and Jaehoon is clearly favoring Dragoons. Now it does seem like Herb is finally building some Dragoons to reinforce, but you know, Jaehoon still has some of those DTs wandering around the field, just totally being a pest. And you know, Herb really ought to put a couple more observers around with his forces and maybe get observer speed, because I just don't think that they're fast enough right now. Yeah, they just keep getting attacked by these random DTs that are out in the field, and it's just being really pesky. They're not doing all that much damage, but, you know, over time, if those get, you know, a bunch of probe kills as probes are transferring from one base to another, or, you know, if they just get a lot of free hits on these armies, it can really swing a battle. And now, still one more big battle in the middle, and storms going down everywhere. This is now Jaehoon's first-person view. It's kind of hard to tell because, you know, both players switch their colors, so when they're going back and forth, you know, each of the first-person views, the first player is green. And wow, that DT along with a couple of Zealots is able to take down that expansion down in the southwest, not the main base, but that natural expansion in the southwest. And that is actually a pretty devastating loss for Herb. He really needed that base up and running, because now Jaehoon is actually getting down his, man, that might be his 7th expansion right now, or excuse me, his 7th base, 6th expansion. Let me try to count that out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's a 6th base. Yeah, and anyways, I'm getting busy counting bases on the mini-map instead of watching what's happening. But Jaehoon clearly in an economic advantage right now, and like I was saying, you can see that like almost 2/3 of the map is controlled by Jaehoon, and Herb just hasn't done enough to establish himself in that southwest position and keep it alive. Losing that base to just such a small force is definitely bad news for him. He really needs to come up with a big win right here would help him out a lot, but he's down in unit count too. Jaehoon's economy is maybe starting to show up, but it might just be a little bit of a positioning battle that's going on right here. You know, Jaehoon has just had more Dragoons this entire game. His storms have been very good, and I think he's really now taken a huge lead in this game just by continually, you know, whittling down those armies, you know, trading armies pretty well, but you know, keeping the army size for Herb down and keeping his own army alive to prevent anything. And he's really just been able to, you know, take over this map. And Herb is now, you know, Jaehoon is threatening to come into, he's already crossed the bridge, so he is into the natural expansion of Herb, and some of his forces getting sandwiched in there, pinchered at the bridge, but he still just has a huge number of Dragoons, and Herb is not reinforcing in time, and Herb GG's, just not enough economy to keep that going. So, bad start for the hideous uniforms for Sparkyz. Hopefully, maybe next week they'll decide to go back to their awesome motorcycle bomber jackets, whatever. Anyways, yeah, that was well played by Jaehoon. Nice storms. Although I like to dislike him. he did play well there. Anyways, we're gonna go ahead and move on to game 2 and see you there.
이 드디어 이제 김재훈 선수가 별 반개를 달게 됐어요.
예, 뭐 하트